You meet, you talk. Your heart races because this person is wonderful. You begin dating, and it suddenly becomes very awkward because your family is wealthy, your new love is not. Tim Volk welcomes back Kristen Olivieri to the podcast, along with
Woohoo.
guest Coventry Edwards-Pitt, to talk about things to consider when you have more money than the person you're seeing. Now, Covey is the chief creative officer at Ballentine Partners, a firm that specializes in providing investment and wealth management advice to wealthy families, but she is also the author of a 10-year research study and several books that highlight how people have reconciled their wealth, values, and relationships. Kristen is a journalist and editor of Crain Currency, a publication for families managing generational wealth. So, Tim, dating, family, wealth sounds like a tricky triumvirate to me.
Ugh, I keep thinking about it because Kristen and I were having this conversation because the world of dating today, in and of itself, is tricky, is challenging, far more than when I was much younger. And I know it's hard to believe that I'm older than the other two that are on the call here with me,
Yesterday.
but I am. And I started thinking about, well, what if I had a lot of money? What if I was dating someone that had a lot of money? How would that work? Because I think it's already a problem. And so Kristen and I had this great conversation one day about, okay, we need to talk about this. So one, I want to welcome Kristen back, as some of you, our listeners, thank you for listening to us. Thanks for following us, and welcome Kristen back, because she is the cool, she's the bomb, and we have so much fun together. And then
Any
we
chance to be
are,
with you.
oh my God, it's so fun. It makes it so cool. And then we're so excited because our friend Covey is on the show today, and Covey is also the bomb, you guys. So Covey has, great credentials. She's a CFA, a CFP. So being CFPs, what that tells you is that we are technically proficient, and that our careers have really moved beyond the technical, which is what everybody thinks about in wealth management. Don't you think, Covey? And so
Yes, I love how you're saying this, Tim.
because I think
Go
what
on.
happens is we were asked to do more around the human issues around wealth than the technical issues. And there are a humongous amount of our colleagues that work on the technical issues that execute flawlessly, do a great job. When you get into the mucky stuff, the family, the relationships, the soft issues, is when it becomes difficult. And so many people don't want to talk about it. Even the families don't want to talk about it. And so Covey's written a few books, and her books live at, and I love how she says this, at the intersection of heart and wealth. She's spoken over 150 events of wealth owning families and advisors, consults to individuals on the strategies of her book. She's been quoted widely in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, Investment News. I mean, it's pretty cool. And she lives in Boston. Seems like a lot of our friends live in Boston.
And
So I'm
Tim, if
welcome
you
to the show.
remember how I couldn't get over Covey when I just recently saw her speak. So Covey, I've known you for a long time throughout the industry. You have been one of the thought leaders for a very long
Thanks,
time. And I
Kristen.
saw you speak at the Southeastern Family Office Forum last fall. And when Tim and I started talking about this, I said, I have our gal, and it's
Mhm.
Covey. Because conferences are what they are. But I remember looking up from my notepad and saying, I need to listen to what she's saying because it's really profound. So I'm just so
Wow.
glad we're all able to get together.
Thank
And
you,
I,
Kristen. I'm so happy to be here with you two. My lucky day. Fun conversation with wonderful people on a very good topic. Very good topic.
well, I think, and to further clarify, Covey, we like to have our audience help think about wealth in the five capitals, because it helps people sort of organize it in, the human, intellectual, social, spiritual, and financial capitals. So how would you today say where this falls into which categories?
Oh, I mean, it touches on really all of them. But
Ah,
when I really think of where the whole point about the book's living at the intersection of heart and wealth. I think it's human and kind of spiritual. I mean, I think so much of my work is about people being able to live the life that they're called to be, the person they're called to become, and having wealth not derail that process, maybe somehow, empower that process, but also what we're talking about today. The thing I was amazed about with my third book is how critical the partner is in that process of becoming who you're meant to become. It's
Yes.
really oh, finding that person for you is a gift that really helps you become yourself. It's weird. People don't think about it that way, but I heard so much about that everyone credited their partner for who they were and helping them be their best self. So would love to.
Well, it goes to a concept that I have to remind myself at times when you're in the middle of the work, you're doing the work, is that, people that are raised in families of wealth had no choice in this. They were born into the family. They had no voice about this. The family success was there prior to them, or was created during their lifetime. And really what they've had to do is adjust their life and get used to it. But we notice that in Crazy Rich Asians, right? Because we see, which is one of my favorite of the current movies. We're going to talk about movies, you guys, the whole time. But what's his name? The really hot guy, Goldie? No, Henry
Golding. Henry Golding. Yeah, Henry Golding.
Golding. And he's in his childhood, and they're in he's taking his girlfriend from New York, has no clue about the money. She's packed the food for the long flight to Asia, and then they arrive and they're going to go first class. And she's like, I think there's been a mistake. We're not rich. And he's like, oh, well, my family has a little business with the airlines, and so we're able to, get upgraded or whatever. So like into a suite. I've flown all over the world. Kristen, have you ever been in one of those suites?
I haven't. It's
No.
on my bucket list.
Yeah. So, or this one with the showers? No.
No.
So anyway, they go to the childhood home for this party, and it's, where he was raised, and it's this huge event, and it is the biggest mansion in Singapore because his family founded Singapore. And then he spills wine. Remember, his girlfriend spills a little red wine on him. So he goes up to his childhood room to change clothes, put on a shirt. His mom comes in. She's helping him. He's looking around for the cigars. And she says, if you're looking for those cigars, I threw those out years ago. And she says, I tried to get rid of your clothes, but your nanny, whatever her name is, wouldn't let it happen. And so you realize that this is his childhood bedroom. Even though it's a incredibly wealthy family, it's still where he thinks of his childhood as just his bedroom. Right? From the outside, it seems different, but from the inside, it's just like anybody's bedroom.
It's all perspective.
Right. And then to finish that scene, because we'll refer to it later, he turns to his mother as she's adjusting his foulard, and he says, well, Mom, I thought you'd be very happy that the first girl I bring home is Chinese. And she turns and goes, Chinese American, the worst. And I fell out. Because you realize in that moment, it doesn't matter the culture. It doesn't matter where, when, how. You're never going to be good enough. Never going to be good enough.
I love that scene. And that is a perfect scene because you see both. That movie is so well done, by the way, in terms of how it explores these issues. And that scene shows you the parents' perspective, the family's perspective. This girl will never be us. She'll never be good enough. And what going into that scene is the history of their relationship so far. And I think what's hard for the audience in that movie is they seem to have this great relationship, and then they get on the plane, and it's like, how could he not have told her? How could he not? How could this be a surprise? They've been together for a year. And they give him the most poignant line, which I really saw to be true in the research I did. And he basically, his defense is, I didn't tell you because I like who I am when I'm with you, without having to be everything else.
Yeah.
I just got shivers.
Yeah, it's an honest and I think authentic answer, which is he wanted a chance to just be that before bringing in all of this, because in a way that is his true self. Who he was is his true self, and now he has to layer in everything else and make sure she's cool with it, which, as we all know, how the rest of the movie goes. It all works out. Spoiler alert.
But it's true though, right? I mean, it's so really what we're talking about today is one is to have you share your journey while advising families in the relationships that they're exploring. But also I think what I've done is in our outline, I've come up with sort of 7 things to consider while dating when one person has more money than the other, because it's a challenge. So why is that important? Why is this important for us to talk about? What's important for the audience?
Well, there's a lot of things. Do you want me to? I mean,
just start spitballing, both of you.
I mean, well, Kristen, do you want to go? I don't want to.
No.
Is there anything that? Okay.
No, you hit it.
All right. I actually think my thing I'd say is this is less different than you'd think. I think sometimes people look at this and think, oh, dating with money, dating someone who doesn't have as much money, that's a huge, perhaps insurmountable divide. Does that mean that people with money should date only people with money? And what I saw from my research is actually what matters is that this person sees you, the real you, and helps you continue along the process of becoming that. And that the person is not too swayed by the money either way. Doesn't love that you have the money, doesn't hate that you have the money, basically is able to coexist with the reality of the fact that this is part of your life. And in a way, I think that what's real surprising to perhaps the family with the money is that the person who joins the family, the partner who didn't have the money, ends up actually going through the very same identity journey as the rising gen / inheritor themselves. Most of young people who inherit wealth go through some journey where they go from thinking, I'm not really wealthy. That's not who I am. I didn't really make this money. This just happened to me, but yet now I have to integrate this into my reality, and it is me, and people look at me and they see it as me. And actually, many times their partners come into the relationship and at first think, that's not really my problem. That's your problem. But what they learn over the course of a mutually wonderful, life-giving and enriching relationship is that it becomes also their journey. They have to have the same identity evolution where they realize, actually, this money is part of my life. It is part of my children's life. It is part of my day-to-day reality. I do have influence over decisions about what happens with this money. The rest of the world looks at me and think, this is my money. And that can be a real shock to the partners who think at first this is other than me. But in a way, it's a positive because both parts of the couple can help each other. They're actually going through a very similar journey. They can do that together.
And what I think is really interesting now, because I think that's the point where we find that people have coupled up, but the dating landscape in general has changed. I mean, even since I was dating, which wasn't that long ago, our reality, it's 2024, people meet sometimes or oftentimes online, right? Most people are using dating apps. They're using different ways to connect, which isn't necessarily the same as it was a generation or 2 generations ago, right? So I think the interesting piece is in those early moments of just even trying to seek a partner. How do you go about it when you're carrying, maybe it's a weight, maybe it's a burden, maybe it's just an observation that I know I have this wealth. How do I even begin the dating process? Do I go on an app and what do I share? What do I not share? What do I disclose? Do I go through mutual friends and let them know I'm looking for somebody? I do think it's a thought process that may be different for the ultra high net worth individual as opposed to someone else. I think that thought process might be different. And I know from my research and talking with people in this space for as long as I have been, there are matchmaking services. People do go that route. And then I'm sure there's lots of mothers and fathers out there that fancy themselves. Lord, thank God my parents didn't do that one. But so I don't even know. And I'd be so curious, Kevin, in your experience, like what is that even first step look like for somebody? You're out of college, you're in your 20s, 30s. Like I do want to find that partner, but how do I even go about it in a safe way, in a thoughtful way?
Well, I think it's
Yeah.
before
Go
Covey,
ahead.
before you say that, I was just thinking we kind of we want to sort of bucket these things in three buckets. Like the dating, I think is a really important part right now that we're going to talk about. Then there's like when it starts getting serious. And then the third bucket's like when it's marriage. Like, and so we'll touch on different parts of it, but I think I just want people to think in terms of we're kind of think the three of us are thinking about it in three buckets. Don't you think? So
Oh yeah.
the dating, I love to hear how Covey you're going to answer this one. This is good. So
Well, okay. So based on, I mean, what I saw in reality with the couples, I interviewed over 50 people for this book I wrote, Engaged, Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise. And so that's 22 couples, and yeah, at least 22 couples. And what I saw was a lot of people met in the ways that a lot of people have met their partner. They met in college. Some of them met actually younger than college, which was interesting. At least one couple met online. Um, and I think it's natural when you have wealth to be going through an entire internal cognitive process about how much to share, even with your friends. I mean, forget your potential romantic partners, even with your friends, how much to share. And what I saw was that a couple things held true. One, the reality is that a lot of times when young people who will inherit wealth are meeting that person, potential partner, they themselves don't know that much about their family's situation.
that's right. That's right.
They know there's money, they know that they'll maybe inherit some money at some point, but they often don't have dollars and cents and zeros and stuff. And I actually saw that can be somewhat helpful in that what it allows them to do is be able to approach a relationship and be as honest as they can be. They're talking about the life that they know. Like so when people met in college, there was no need to say, well, I'm going to be away this weekend because I'm going to a family office meeting, and by the way, that's what this is, and da, da, da. They didn't really have that as much as part of their lives, and it allowed there to be some period of time where the relationship was building a foundation without that needing to be talked about. That said, the last point I'll say there is that then as the revelations start to happen in that young person's life and they do learn more and they do start becoming or being asked to become more involved, it was important that they then could share that with their partner as they were learning. So they never felt like they were honest at one point and now they're going to lie. It was sort of like a generally think of peeling onion, like an increasing process of revelation as appropriate and as it happens in their own life. And I saw that working out pretty well. There were some funny stories where, like, obviously you go visit mom and dad, and there's a really, really big house, or things like that, or the house you're staying in the morning, you realize there's another house and the house you're in is actually the guest house and there's another. So I think that there were some of these tangible moments of revelation. Like we haven't talked much about this, but oh yeah, my parent, and then how often the young people I saw handle is, yeah, my parents have money. It's not really part of my life at the moment. So that's what I'd say on that front.
Well, I think I think that's a really interesting set of stats from the couples that you interviewed, the people you interviewed. I think that I have friends that have had I think the dating landscape, first off, you mentioned the matchmaking services. Do they work? Do we know if they work?
I don't know. I know they exist.
Covey, you had a couple thoughts before.
Well, I did talk with one matchmaking service, and I actually did ask that question about how successful have you been? Do you follow up?
Yeah.
Do you see if these people get divorced later on?
Interesting.
And I might be misremembering this, but I think the answer was no. We don't really follow up.
Follow up.
So I don't know. I think matchmaking can be hard. It might work. I mean, I know of lots of stories of people who've met online. That's worked great. And I know of people who've been introduced by friends and that hasn't worked great. So it's hard to say,
Yes,
but
right. I agree. Yeah. And then we see The Bachelor. You see all these shows about this, which is just almost ridiculous in a way.
Love is Blind. Have we
Love
all
is
watched Love is
Blind.
Blind?
Yeah. I mean,
You know,
I
that couple's
think,
still together.
is it?
Yeah, there's like 3 from season 4, whatever season was the last season. They stuck together. Yeah, so you know,
You never
it
know.
can.
I
You
I
never know.
think we get asked all the time, like, how did we meet? What are we doing? How was it successful? I mean, I think it's interesting when you ask a couple that's been together 33 years, a gay couple, that, we got married 9 years ago when we could get married. And so the marriage was sort of a function of an administrative function in many ways. I mean, I think that today, this gender fluidity and this lack of wanting to commit to anything might complicate finding this person that you want to have in your life. There's no data for it yet, but it just seems like everybody's waiting for the greener. The way I hear sometimes is that they're waiting for that perfect mate. And I just don't know that the perfect mate exists. We do date people that we become very attracted to and that we like a lot, and they may not be
Amen.
the right one, right?
But you have to kiss some frogs. So
You
I'm
got to
okay with
kiss
that.
some frogs. And sometimes you like kissing the frog.
Yeah, it could be fun.
I think we were also talking about the analogy between sort of trying on or trying out different partners and trying on different jobs. You know, I mean, I think
Sure.
there's a metaphor there, like you sort of just like it's not great to sort of think I'm going to just show up at work and passion will alight on me and that will be like, and I'll discover the perfect career for me. Really, it's a process of investing yourself and your time and learning what you like and learning what you don't like and maybe having a pretty awful job and all of that. And I think it's a little bit the same with dating experiences. Like it's not necessarily a bad thing to have a relationship that you think, yeah, that wasn't the perfect one for me because you
Oh,
learn
yeah.
about yourself.
We learn so much about it. I mean, I think we talked about this before, and it's such a cliche, but you learn more from your failures than your successes. So if you do date and it doesn't work, I don't know, in my personal experience, when you do meet that person that, Covey, to your point earlier, makes you better or allows you to be your true self, let's put it that way, gives you that space, you recognize them because you've said, well, I've done these other things. I've had these experiences and some of them are fun. Some of them are awful. I've learned from them. And that's why I think dating is important for anybody. I mean, before they settle down, because it makes it becomes you learn a lot more about yourself too, how you handle situations and experiences and bad things and good things. And you get a more holistic picture of who you are.
Well, you learn a lot about yourself. That's what you're saying. Is you also learn to have respect for yourself. I think there's a period where we get infatuated with people and they may not treat us well, but we're so infatuated with them for whatever reason. Like it's just great sex. Great sex can get in the way of a lot of good things because it does, it sort of masks the ability to sort of look at this as a whole, as a relationship. How would this work? And I think, Covey, you've had some really good points about like trust building takes time. And I think that's one of the things I think that people are underestimating today is there's not an instant trust. And trust has moments where it's broken. I mean, can you repair it? Can you be authentic about it? What do you
Tim,
think?
can I go back for a second on this
Yeah.
thing about learning about yourself? Because that made me think of something that was in the book, which is that, it's so interesting. Here I set out to write this book about couples. So I was going to start at marriage, basically, prenups and marriage and all that. And what you realize when you start to talk to people and you ask them these open-ended questions, like tell me about the story of you and tell me about the story of how you get together and all this stuff, you hear a lot about each couple's individual identity journey to become the person who is ready to meet a person. Actually, the story doesn't start when you meet this person. The story starts in how you became a sufficiently mature adult human to be able to welcome love into your life and have something to offer. And it turns out that is really borne out by the researchers. Actually, this class, I think it's at Northwestern, it's called Marriage 101. And the class is actually about working on yourself. It's a lot of like taking quizzes to learn about yourself, learn about your own issues, work on your own issues, because there are whole pieces that whether or not there's a perfect person, there's becoming that person yourself that is ready to be out there. And I see this a lot in our work in this field as well, that when you see relationships that really struggle, it's often because what you have there is a rising gen inheritor who may be having a lot of internal struggles still, like shame about the wealth or whatever. And so,
Mhm.
like, say, take the person who's feeling a lot of shame about the wealth. They might go find a partner who hates money, and it's sort of allowing them to work
Yes.
through this internal struggle, but it's really more about their own inner feelings. And oftentimes those relationships don't work out that well because it's
Mm.
really much more about this young person needing to work through some things on their own, rather than finding an outward. You need an inner solution rather than an outward solution. So
Mhm.
So the self-awareness becomes a very important element here
yeah.
as you look out at the landscape. And I also think you need to be aware of your own biases. Like,
Hmm.
if you're
Absolutely.
talking about inclusion, and we joke about, because I'm married to an Italian and Kristen's Italian, her husband's Italian, and we just talk about the movies, like The Big Fat Greek Wedding, when the dad says, when he, I think he starts the whole line about, like, this is what happens when you're dating this Xenia with the long stringy hair, and didn't I tell you this is what happens when you educate women? And the mom's sitting there ignoring her husband, right? And Tula's sitting there, and he's like, but is he a good Greek boy? I don't know. Is he good Greek? Is he coming from a good Greek family? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And so then he leaves, and the mother realizes, okay, Tula, you've had your fun. And she turns it, but Mama, and she says, I want you to end it now. But Mama, I love him. Oh, Tula, eat something.
Your accent is on point.
You know what this is? Can we talk about My Big Fat Greek Wedding for a second while we're here?
Yeah.
We can.
I
Great
love all
film.
these movies. And I thought a lot about that movie because something that they do in that movie, I wish we had in our industry. Okay, so right, he needs to convert, right? He converts.
Mhm.
How does he convert? They put him in the kiddie tub, right? Kiddie pool, and they pour the water. It's like very visible act of he's converting, but really what's happening there is the family is welcoming him
That's
Mhm.
into
right.
their traditions in a very
Mhm.
visible way.
Yes.
And as back to sort of the wealthy families, is there an equivalent tradition where that new person joining is visibly, hilariously, visibly welcomed? No. In fact, the prenup, which is happening at the same time in the relationship status,
Yep.
is the opposite.
Oh my God. I just finished White Lotus. Did you
Yeah,
two watch this?
I didn't.
Yes.
No, sorry.
Put it on the list, Covey.
Okay.
Exactly to your point, and I'm sorry for interrupting.
No.
There's a scene where there's a wealthy couple, or the husband is wealthy. They're young, they're newlyweds, they're in their honeymoon in Hawaii. Horror ensues. But in this scene, she's marrying in, she's a young journalist, funny enough, could not connect with this more. And she married a wealthy man, and the mother winds up showing up on their honeymoon for a variety of reasons. They screw them on the room, what have you. And the mother winds up having a moment with the new daughter-in-law post-wedding in this beautiful 5-star luxury resort in Hawaii. And she's saying to her, well, you don't have to work. You are now part of the family. This is what we do. These are the things that you need to accept. So in a lot of ways, what you're talking about was, I think she was trying to accept her in her own warped way.
Mm-hmm.
But none of this, and this goes back to sort of transparency and discussion, the dating process seems to have been revealed to this young bride prior. And you see this whole tumultuous relationship between the married couple, that she's thinking of leaving the marriage because all of this stuff is just coming to light now. And she feels like she has been, gaslighted, for a better term, right? That she did not see what was happening. She didn't realize what she was signing up for. But there's so much duality there because she's the mother in her own ways trying to accept her, bring her in, and then she's been left out in the dark. But there's so many things, and it's not always just one thing. But I love your point on this this concept of welcoming into a family, because I think
Yep.
we all join families when you get married or you just sign up to be a life partner of somebody's, right? You better love the family because you're
Right.
part of it.
Absolutely. And I think part of where we make things a little harder sometimes in this industry is, I think because we talk about all the stuff, family governance and mission statements and onboarding the young married and whatever, it's very, very one-sided. When people don't
That's
have
right.
wealth, the couple gets together and the families with an S meet each other and the families learn about each other's traditions.
Right.
And I mean, back to my Greek wedding, they invite, remember his parents who don't talk, to the,
She
and then
doesn't
by
eat
the end,
meat.
everyone's
She
having a
doesn't
great
eat
time.
meat.
And remember that, and he goes to at the wedding, that there are apples and oranges, but at the end, we're all fruit.
We're all, exactly. So
And then the
right.
gift is they buy them a house.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
it's over the top. Like you don't expect it. This is a moderate family. The families are together. You think that the boyfriend's family has more money than the Greek family. But you know what I mean? I just think it was a great scene of this families coming together and learning about each other. And it's funny that the Ian's family doesn't have a big family, and they actually fall in love with being part of the big family. So
And that happens.
that's
And
this
sometimes,
ritual.
you come
Yeah.
more this way or that way. But
Yeah.
but to your point, Kristen, about White Lotus, which sounds like it'd be interesting to see, but
You have to watch them.
you're
Yes.
right. It's so complex
So
because
good.
here that mother-in-law is thinking, I'm stepping outside of my comfort zone. I'm trying to welcome this young woman. I'm trying to say these things. And the young woman's thinking, A, why am I just hearing about this now? But B, the general message that is received is, and I heard about this in my research, I was welcomed, but basically the welcoming was, here's your to-do list of how you need to act to fit into how we do things. And that's not really, as you have been talking about, that's not true inclusion. So I talk about like the people who had good experiences were welcomed not only at the table, but they were said, you can speak. Like we actually want
They
to
were given the
hear.
floor. They were
Right. We
given
want
the
to
floor.
hear your ideas.
Yeah.
We hope you will help us learn. It's not just here's what you must know so that you fit into our culture, which is, so yeah, try not to be one
Well, I
sided
think my
about it.
mom one day called me. You guys have heard me tell stories about my mom and also my grandparents, they're a big influence. But my mom one day called and said, what happens in life is that you choose this person. Not everybody chooses wisely, because you don't realize that this person is going to influence your life. We know what an influence we're going to be because like all three of us are pretty strong personalities. So we know we're going to have an influence come hell or high water, but we really don't know what that influence of this other person's going to be on our life. And it doesn't always work out. It doesn't always work out. And we've seen that in our friends, our family, where they didn't choose wisely, but they didn't think of it, I think, as an active choice. I don't think people are actually thinking about this as an active choice sometimes. But as you said before, one is to understand our own internal bias and also understand when by dating a lot, by being in the dating world and failing, you start to understand what it is that you really want in a relationship. And I used to say, you want a mutually loving and supporting relationship, which sounds so simple and almost trite. But from a spiritual standpoint, it's a very hard thing to come to terms with. It's hard to say, I'm going to open myself to vulnerability and learning, and there's always little things about the relationship. I think it's the little things, like the toothpaste, you don't put the top on the toothpaste type thing, or there's little things in the relationship that you start to understand. Maybe that's what's going to send you over the edge. And I think of the movie Chicago, where the big scene, the jailhouse scene, which is one of my favorite scenes. He had it coming, just the same. And so those are little things in that. But if we understand our values and we understand how we're going to share and welcome, maybe maybe that's an important piece. I think Jill Shipley, we had her on the show earlier this last year where she talked about our relationship with money. I think you've hinted to this several times, but we have to understand our relationship with money,
Mhm.
both if we have it or don't have it, or if we're raised around it, and we don't have access to it, or you know what I mean? I think that's a really interesting point that you are sort of repeating.
And Covey, I'm so curious, and we didn't cover this in the prep, but do you, in your experience when you were doing the work for the book and interviewing these couples, did you find most couples had similar mindsets? Maybe not necessarily personalities, but sort of to Tim's point about money and sort of being on the same page, if you will. And the reason I bring it up, I'll tell you a quick little story, is we were Catholic and we got married in the Catholic Church and we did pre-Cana. And when we sat down to do pre-Cana before we got married, I was very much under the assumption it was very religious, what have you. Wasn't religious at all. We had a lay person meet us in a diner. Lovely. I nicknamed this guy pre-Cana Peter. He was great. They made us fill out we had to each individually do a compatibility survey, finances, love, extended family. And there were all these, like where you want to live, how you want to save. I mean, most of it was centered around finance, to be honest. And we had to individually respond to the survey.
Wow.
My husband and I got only one answer wrong out of 50 questions. And I remember seeing that data and I went, well, if I was ever worried, I'm definitely marrying the right guy. And I remember the journalist in me had to ask pre-Cana Peter, in your experience, because he also did marriage counseling. What couples do you see, because you've seen them sort of the dating process, now they're at the marriage stage, and then now you counsel folks that have been married and having marital issues. Are you seeing sort of opposites attract? Are you seeing like-minded people stay together? What have you? And he was hard-pressed to answer it because I'm sure even you, Covey, when I put you on the spot and ask you, I'm sure you've seen other things and there's always an outlier. But when I pushed him, he had said to me, I normally see people with similar mindsets or personalities in it for the long haul. If they were truly opposites, he said, I saw the attraction and why they were together, but I didn't see them last long term. So I'd be curious, when you interviewed these folks for the book, were you seeing a lot of similarities, or is it something where they wrap their heads around the concept of their wealth together, or what was your experience?
Yeah. So, I love, it's so interesting. So, like I said, I interviewed these 22 couples and they ranged in age from, I'd say 40s to 80s, but all still in their first marriages. So some had been married for a very, very long time. And I kind of went in thinking, since these people have been very, successful in marriage, that maybe they did pre-Cana or that kind of stuff. Like I was interested to know how many people did anything like that. I think maybe fewer than 10%. I think it was 2 couples maybe who had some sort of premarital process like that. What I did see was universal was this commitment to openly communicating about anything that came up at the time that it came up, basically. And that's how people dealt with, like, hey, like there was one story where, they started to observe differences in spending values, really. One partner was spending more frequently, not egregiously, but just spending more frequently in a way that the other partner viewed as sort of like not necessary. And so that led to a really interesting discussion about why that was and what their shared goals were really for their finances. And so, and there was another couple where they came from incredibly different financial backgrounds, and they kind of worked that through by just talking about it, talking about, what is credit card debt? How do we work on that? How do we come up with an agreement about what each of us can spend? What's the sort of total dollar value each of us should talk to the other one about before we go above, if we're spending? And so there was a lot of, one couple actually does this thing they call State of the Union, which I think is awesome. They actually once a year go out to a restaurant that's like a different, so it's like special. It's not their typical place. And they just talk about how things are going. Because what I brought up was like, yeah, because what I brought up is like some people are good at just talking about stuff when it comes up all the time, but other people need like a plan, and so I thought that was a great idea for a plan. They do this once a year. So
do you think it's any different? Go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
no,
off.
I was just gonna say, it gave me faith that certainly I think shared vision of life together is awesome, and I think that is the couples that stick together have a shared vision. But I think there could be a process by which you articulate your shared vision and agree.
Hmm.
There was an article, I forget now the author, but it was an article in the journal that I quoted from, and she and her husband just kind of like wrote a contract early in their dating life. They went on a vacation and they just talked about the lives they wanted, what they wanted to do, and they kind of wrote that down as their goals, their dreams. And so I think it's worth doing that.
Do you think it's any different for gay couples? The LGBTQ plus community?
I mean, I don't know from personal experience. I I I did have I tried to have as a diverse research pool as possible, and I would say gay or straight or different ethnicities. I didn't really see
The
a
difference.
difference across on this point. But I don't know. What do you think, Tim?
Do you
No, I
guys have a
think
State
it's.
of the Union? Because I would
Do
love
we?
to be
We
there for
kind of
that.
have. Well, I'll just say that my husband
I'll
sometimes
cook.
sends me a calendar invite for the dining room table, like at 2 o'clock on a Sunday for a meeting. And I'm like, who does that? Who sends me did you
I love
accept?
that.
I said, I did. He says, okay, well, then I need you to do a little prep work. And I'm like, oh my God, this is just so, yeah, I think that for John and I, it's different in the sense of having been together a long time. Everything's meshed. I really think that, some of our friends keep everything separate. We didn't. I think whatever
Hmm.
works for you. I think the values. I think if we were to go through the 7 things that I sort of organized, I want you to think. I'm going to run through them, and then I want you
Mhm.
each to comment on them. Okay? Because we're
You
going to
got it.
summarize this. Okay?
Writing down.
So
Lightning round.
first thing, lightning round. Okay. So we talked about control and fear. Being aware of our bias and thinking, this beautiful person could be part of our child's life or our life. 2, the values. Do we know my values? Do we know each other's values? 3,
Mhm.
Your identity outside of money. And this is no order. There's no precise order, but I'm just taking it from all of our notes. 4, the family, the parents. And this includes for some of my friends that came out later in life, got a divorce and found a new family, and their family's either accepting them or not. So there's a whole nother dynamic there as we
Mm.
get older and we change our direction and we find a new partner. Are we accepting of that? 3, or no, that was number 4, parents and family. The authenticity and the worry of the family, stuff like that. 5, I have time and patience. I think it's something where basically we've all talked about getting to know each other takes time and starting to peeling that onion back. 6, revelation. And I like how you state this: revelation plus honesty with partners. Listen to your inner voice, your intuition, and to develop a partnership, humor, companionship, communication. Those are the dynamics I think that have duration. 7, honesty and integrity. And I always
Mm.
think of that when I think Bucky Fuller in the final days of his life quoted the saying, if we could learn to love comprehensively and live our life with integrity and take personal responsibility for our lives, the world's problems would fall.
Hmm.
So those are the 7: control and fear, values, identity outside of money, parents and family,
Mhm.
time, patience, revelation of honesty with partners, and then honesty and integrity. Thoughts?
I have thoughts. Oh, okay. Two areas I have thoughts. So it's interesting. I actually connect control and fear with parents. I think number 1 and 4 are connected.
Mm.
Because I often see, I think unfortunately, I think as an industry, we sometimes unwittingly reinforce the illusion of control. To let parents feel as if they have control or they should have control because they have
Yeah.
wealth, so they should have control. When in reality, I think no parents have any real control. Certainly not when you have an adult child. I mean, they are adults. They go
Yeah.
off and they live their lives, and you get to either be part of that life, I think, if you get on board or not.
Or
And
you
it's
miss
kind of
it.
or you miss it. And there's a great
Mm.
love story, great example of the father who got on board and the father who didn't get on board. And guess which father still talks to the young people at the end of the
Yep.
movie.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
I generally think that something I spend time coaching parents about is, remember how we talked about how often the young person, the inheritor, sees this partner as helping them become themselves. I heard something even more specific. I heard, actually, my partner was the first person I met in my life who saw me as an adult.
Oh,
That's
okay.
amazing. Okay, so I thought I try to coach parents of rising gen to realize that when your young person finds that person who sees them as an adult, that is like a complete gift for them. It's a gift for them to have that relationship in their life. So try to see that partner, the partner who sort of the system tends to be fearful about because they think,
Yeah.
oh, who is this person? They're an outsider. And worse than that, I often see that if the young person has found the right person, they're going to probably evolve into a different person. They're growing, they're
Mhm.
changing. And so that's normal. Like you want the partner that's going to help you evolve and grow.
Yes.
And often the family that's circling around that has been thinking there's an illusion of control, meaning stagnation, keep things the same, looks at that change and thinks, that's dangerous. This partner must not be good for my child.
Is that the second or is that just the one? The
It's 1
control
and
and
4
fear?
together, control and fear and parents. And I basically just
Okay.
try to say,
Got it.
try to think of, and of course, I'm not talking about relationships that are not good relationships. The people I interviewed, these were good relationships. Um,
Which is nice.
that,
We need role models. I
yes,
really like that.
right. And I think I encourage parents to look at this partner who is, so say, I'll just try to be specific about this. When I get a call that says, that often starts from the parents like, oh, our child met someone, we're not sure, we're concerned, should we get a prenup? That's like often how, the conversation goes. And what I try to do in that situation is listen to how they describe the relationship and what they're observing. And what I often hear is, this sounds great. This relationship sounds fine. It sounds
Yeah.
like this young person is evolving into who they're meant to
Yes.
be. And so I try to coach the parents to realize that and say the change you're observing is good change. And actually, why don't you try to see, it'd be good if you try to see your child as their partner sees them, as the adult that your partner sees them, as their partner sees, and see the partner as your child does, like as the gift
Love
that's
that.
helping them.
Yeah.
And that is not easy,
No.
but I think it's very meaningful in terms of enhancing their relationships, all the relationships involved. So that's
Chris-
what I'd say on that front.
Kristen, what do you think? Any
I
of
was just
these things you're
gonna,
going to hit?
yeah, I mean, I think authenticity and revelation, which is what Covey's talking about. I mean, it's also revelation for the parents. It's change and it's time to let go. And what are you fearful of? Right? If you embrace this partner, if you bring them, if you spend time with them to actually get to know them as an authentic human being, you're showing your child that you support them no matter what. And I felt like this is
That's
very
right.
profound. When I became a parent, I started thinking about these things, and my kids are very young. But the best thing we could ever do is be along that journey with them. We can't teach them who to be. I want to be a witness to my child's life, right? So I think but of course I'm controlling and fearful of lots of things. But I think if I'm looking at it from all perspectives, because I see very much the parental fear, the fear of change, which we all fear, the fear of losing their child, them not being your little baby, the fear of bringing an outside person into this family unit that might be doing all right and they're doing their thing, and now a new dynamic is brought into it, right? And then woof. We've all dealt, like, no matter the wealth spectrum, you've always dealt with these things. I've dealt with it entering into a new family. But I think the perspective I also look through is the lens of the person that doesn't hold the wealth. I've always been the outsider in the family office space, right? My job has been the observer. And I've heard so many stories over my career. And I always think of, well, what would I do if I felt this way? And I think the White Lotus example is something that hit home, and I just watched it the other night. So I'm sorry it's not in the prep notes, but,
No, it's okay.
What's the perspective of that person? Are they being their authentic selves too and asking the questions to their partner? Or maybe they're approaching their future in-laws and saying, like, this is who I am and this is what I need to be part of this family. And no matter the wealth, maybe there's a wealth disparity, and that's okay, but here's what I am and what I can bring to this family. So I see so much of this, but as I age, I think in life, I really like the thing that gets me every day is authenticity. Like, am I living an authentic life? And I think if you kind of put that piece at the heart of like family dynamics, a lot of things fall into place, but it's really hard to be authentic. And it's really hard to be vulnerable. And it's hard to raise your hand when something's not going right. Right. And this whole process, there's so many things that cannot go right in that. So
I think your communication piece becomes so important here because
extremely.
There's so much that could be misinterpreted. I think of my Granny. You guys have heard me talk about her, but she used to say later in her life. It wasn't early in her, late in life. She said, I just think that money is what money does. And I used to sort of think, okay, whatever. But now looking at it, I'm like, I think she's right. I think that the money is ephemeral. That's not the goal. So you guys, this has been an amazing conversation. We're going to have more of this topic. I think we can talk about when it gets serious in the marriage stuff, but I also think that it continues to link back and forth to where it starts and how it starts to evolve, and then where it really evolves into a life partnership. But I just want to say, you guys are amazing.
And you are too, Tim.
Thank you, Tim. You too.
Patrice, what do you think of this?
I want to know when part 2 is.
Okay.
I want to know. This was wonderful. You folks were just so talk about authentic. You were so authentic in your comments and your observations. It was wonderful.
Thanks, Patrice.
For our listeners, we're going to have a reference for the of Covey's books, so don't worry, we'll have that, and then also we'll have a couple other things like maybe the list of movies for people to watch. So we'll add that to it.
They'll be all
in the about the movies. Oh
they'll be in the show notes there, Tim.
Yeah, we'll put them in the show notes.
Great. And how about contact info?
Covey, how do people get a hold of you?
You know what? There is a I should know the answer. Covey at healthy. Here you go. It's on the back of my book because I mean, there's my work email, but easier is Covey at healthywealthywisecollection.com. I think that's a better email.
That's a good. Okay, yeah. That's good.
It's because that's like the book site, healthywealthywisecollection.com. So yeah, that's probably the best thing. How fun! I could talk to you guys all day. That would be fun.
So fun.
Kristen, how do people get a hold of you if they want to subscribe to Crain Currency, if they want to listen to what you're doing?
Yeah, craincurrency.com. Sign up for the publication on LinkedIn at Crain Currency, or at my personal page at Kristen Olivieri. Yeah, that's the best way to reach me.
And everybody, you know how to reach me at tim.volk@tvolco.com. I want to thank my guests. I love having Kristen as a co-host, and Covey, you have been so gracious. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful being on with you.
So
all right,
fun.
And listeners, there will be a part 2. I guarantee it. So subscribe to this podcast, and you will know when that is coming your way. And of course, share this podcast with colleagues and friends and family. I'm Patrice Sikora. Thanks for being with all of us.
Bye, everybody.